Greetings, Maggie Kulyk here, CEO and founder of Chicory Wealth. Thanks for joining this morning's conversation about increasing your impact through charitable giving. I'm with Faye, Dresner, and Kelly Caffarelli of Resonance Atlanta. And I guess you would call yourselves donor advisors. Is that what you would call yourselves? Would that be the proper term?
I think among other things,
Right.
what I would say we would call ourselves is a firm that is helping both nonprofits and donors maintain, sustain, and amplify the effects of the social impact sector.
Great. And do you, before we launch into, charitable giving in general, do you want to each give just a quick bio and what got you here today in terms of the work you're doing together now? Either one of you want to start? Okay.
Faye, you want to start?
I'll pick.
Sure.
Faye, we'll start.
Just very simple. My entire career has been in the nonprofit or the social impact sector, and I want it to remain sustainable. And that's really at the root of the business that Kelly and I have started for me. I'm also a donor, and it feels really good to give, and I want to help other people have that experience. And lastly, it just takes knowledge to navigate this process. My background is in social work and in business, and I'm deploying those skills towards this end, actually. So I'm really glad to be here, and I'm happy to be talking about this with all of you.
Great. Thanks, Faye. Kelly?
And Faye and I have really different experiences because I'm a lawyer by trade and training. I practiced in large firms here in Atlanta and then went to Home Depot as a securities and corporate lawyer. And ended up transitioning to run the Home Depot Foundation as well as an employee assistance fund. So saw both big picture what was going on in the nonprofit sector, but also saw what was going on day to day with people who weren't making a lot of money and were having issues. And so those were great complementary perspectives. And left Home Depot to do some consulting. And Faye and I worked together, and then both ended up out of no longer working full time, but felt like we really had experiences that could benefit both nonprofits and donors, as she said, to strengthen the sector, but also to just make people feel better about what they're doing and more confident that they were having the impact they really wanted to have.
Great, great. Well, just combined enormous amounts of experience in this sector between the two of you and from differing perspectives, which makes it a very interesting partnership. So great to have you here. So we're going to start. We've got just a very little brief PowerPoint that these guys put together that I'm going to try and run successfully. So hold on just a moment. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to start. And here's just to get you going, here's the question. What does the word philanthropy mean? And who first used it in writing? See, that's the payoff question. Most of it, we were joking ahead. It's like, okay, you liberal arts majors out there, I bet you know what the term philanthropy is, but who first used it in writing? Okay, any guesses? Any guesses? If you have a guess, by the way, feel free to put it in the chat, and maybe I can keep an eye on the chat. Anybody want to tell us what it means or take a guess? No Googling.
That's right.
5, 4. There could be prizes. I haven't said there weren't prizes. 3.
Stocks? You giving stocks away?
No, actually, I'm not giving stocks away, Kelly. I was thinking more like a lovely Chicory Wealth cup. Or
okay,
something.
okay, sorry.
That's right.
Worth something.
All right. So let's get the answer here. Let me move to the next slide. We'll go to the next slide. Come on, there we go.
The answer is, as you see on the screen, and the words come from the Greek words philo, which is loving, and anthropos, which is human being. And apparently the first person to think about putting those two words together was Aeschylus, a Greek playwright in the 5th century BCE. So the concept of philanthropy has been around a long time, needless to say.
Indeed. It's the 5th century BCE. There we go. Okay, moving on to our quiz. So, yeah, I mean, there is this idea that there's an impulse to help and it probably comes from mutual benefit in early humanity, and even today, a tribal instinct to support one another, perhaps. Whole cultures are built on this. It's kind of really fascinating. But so how many nonprofit organizations are there in the United States? Anybody want to take a guess?
Come on, go for it, people.
Over-unders are allowed.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. I accidentally hit the button.
Oh.
Sorry, approximately 1.8 million. My bad. That is a lot of nonprofits.
Click one more time, Maggie, because it shows some more information about about the size of these nonprofits, which is really stunning if you think about it. So 88% of those have expenses of less than $500,000.
Yeah.
That's just so many really small nonprofits that we
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we wanted you to know this because this is part of the reason that Kelly and I want to do this work, because identifying the ones you want to give to is like, in some ways, finding a needle in a haystack of 1.8 million.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting, I'm gonna go off script here for just a second, but I warned you. I was thinking about for those of you who are clients, we do a charitable event every year. The organization used to be called, or it's not even an organization. We're just it's just like something we do, and we called it Maggie's Giving Group. We now call it Chicory Giving Group, which is appropriate. And Faye was instrumental in helping me get this idea off the ground back in 2007 to encourage our clients to really think of charitable giving as part of a healthy relationship with money, etc. But where I'm going with this is that we get, every year we ask clients to nominate charities, and then a rotating board of clients decide what 2 charities will be featured at our event. We do have this upcoming event on October 7th. For those of you who live in Atlanta, it will be at Sweetwater Brewery. It's going to be a lot of fun. The 2 charities will be there. But where my mind is going on this is that we get a lot of nominations from really, really small charities, which we like to support, or the client board likes to support. Me and my team don't have a vote on this. It's all client decision making. And it's always strikes me, like some of them are all volunteer, even. Like there's no professional staff at all. And yet they're doing really kind of impactful work. So, but to your point, finding those or evaluating those, or what does that mean? And is that a good thing if they don't yet have staff? And does that mean that are they going to survive or aren't they going to survive? And how small a donation is a decent donation? And how big, all of the things you're trying to work through.
And honestly, Maggie, that comes after even figuring out who you want to give to and why. Then you got to go into what you were just describing, the vetting of the nonprofit itself.
Right, right. But it is true that it seems like people in the United States do give a whole lot of money. In fact, our next question is, how much did individuals, right? And this is individuals. This is not foundations, right? This isn't Home Depot Foundation.
Would not foundations, not the government.
Not family offices? Would it be family office, or would it be that sort of thing? Or or family foundations? This would be just individuals.
Individuals, not foundations, not corporations.
Okay. Again, anybody want to guess before I accidentally press the button? Go ahead.
One guess of $1 billion.
Okay.
Which is a lot of money.
It is a lot of
Good
money.
for you for jumping in. Whoever
Anybody
put that
else
billion.
want to take a guess? All right, let's see. Almost $320 billion. That's a lot. 64% of which was individuals. So 64% of 320. What is that? There'd still be what? Almost 200?
That's the amount that individuals give, and then right.
Oh, I see.
Then
320 is just individuals, and then you've got foundations who are giving an additional 105 billion, and then
yeah,
okay. Wow.
and I think kind of surprisingly, comparatively how little corporations give.
Yeah,
Because that's what we hear about, right? But
we sure do.
just kind of like in politics, it's the little donors that the
Yeah.
small money donors that make up a
Whoops.
huge percentage.
That is amazing. That is a huge amount of money. And just to go back to that slide for just a second, let me see if I can go backwards because I wanted to linger there. Oh, well, I can't. On the corporations, that is surprising to me. I would have thought that corporations were giving away a lot more money for all the amount of time they talk about it.
But again,
And you're hearing about the big corporations, right? And unfortunately, a lot of times the marketing budget to talk about the donation is more than the actual donation.
Oh, interesting.
So if you're buying a football, halftime ad to talk about your donation, you probably didn't spend as much on the donation as you did to buy that time on TV.
Wow.
Not to be cynical, not to be cynical.
Well, but I mean, it is what it is. It's not really cynical if it's truthful, is it?
Right. Well, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
Right.
Semantics, right?
What's
Yeah.
that?
I said it's semantics, but one thing I want to say about the individuals is that's another reason why this business is so important to us, to Kelly and me, is because you can see that's the anchor of the charitable universe. And so we've got to keep feeding that tributary. And that's why we want people to understand and get satisfaction from giving. So they will join in and they'll continue to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I just have a quick question, Kelly, and now that you don't work for them anymore, so I'm just curious, how big was the Home Depot Foundation? Just out of curiosity. I mean, a lot of people tuned in from Atlanta, so Home Depot's it's an entity here in Atlanta.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that the founders, when they give, they really consider that giving representing the company as well, because their wealth did come. So when you go to the aquarium, Bernie kind of considers that giving back from Home Depot as well. But we were giving about $60 million a year.
Okay. Okay.
And
so the foundation must that much larger, right? Because that would be a percentage of the foundation money. Wow. Yeah.
But we weren't endowed. That was all passed through. But remember too that our largest gifts were in small millions, $1 million, $2 million. But we were also giving grants of $1,000 to get communities to come together to create a garden or to build a fence at a school. So you can have impact across the range. The dollar amounts don't necessarily tell you what your impact is.
Well, right. That's a very good point. And going back to the Chicory Giving Group thing, that's kind of our attitude too. We like to have we like to think we're moving a meter, and part of how you move a meter is by focusing on smaller charities too. They're doing right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this next question, there are $230 billion in donor advance funds. That's a lot. How much was distributed from donor advised funds to charities in 2021 as a percentage of that? That's the question. Any guesses out there? Chat folks?
We had one guess in the chat.
Okay, 50%. It looks like 50% of that 230 billion was distributed from donor advised funds. Anybody else? Anyone going? All right. 45 billion, which represents about what, 25%?
Less than that. It was around really around 20%.
Okay.
So you can see on this chart that there were 234 billion in 2021 in the DAF, but in that same year only 45 billion. So yeah, around 20%. And the other thing I want to say to people is, since 2011, if you look at the left-hand side of the chart, contributions held in accounts have gone up to 2021 550%. But the donations have remained at an average of 20 to 25% of total DAF monies. So that's another thing that makes us interested in doing this work, because there's money there to be spent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Kelly, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about why you think people are not spending it. So
yeah.
And Sandy, thank you for that question too. Yeah, I have a couple theories of it. There's some research as well, but you know, if the initial reason to talk about creating a donor advised fund is a tax benefit, right?
Yeah,
So a lot
well,
of times that's the motivation. And so once that's done, you've checked that box. And the entity that's holding the money, Fidelity or whoever, doesn't really have any incentive to tell you to put the money out because they're getting a fee on it.
I was gonna say they're disincented.
They have a counter
Yeah.
incentive, right?
That's right.
Exactly.
And it's sitting there, the money's gone. There's no one pestering you or asking you or telling you that you have to get it out. And research shows that donors are hesitant to give because they're a little overwhelmed. There's 1.8 million charities, and also they're not sure that their money's going to be used well. So those are the two main reasons that people hesitate to give to charity. And so a little bit of inertia, I think,
Oh,
sets
yeah,
in.
yeah.
But
But
think of the opportunity if that money were actually distributed to help our communities and to help solve the problems people care about. So again, that's what we care about, is helping people think about giving and how they want to help. And then also being sure that the nonprofits are being able to use the money wisely and have the impact. So
Yeah, I want to add one thing to that. And then I think there's a question for you, Maggie, in the chat, but if when all of you are hiring a financial advisor or working with a financial advisor to manage your money, so why wouldn't you work with someone with expertise in the nonprofit sector, in measuring impact and in all of those things that we do, in order to make sure that you're doing that as wisely and as strategically as you are investing your money? I mean, that's kind of, the more we thought about it, the more we were thinking, this is a skill set and has taken us lots of years of experience, and we want to share that with people.
right,
It's not a given that somebody would know how to do this.
right. And I do think there is a little bit of, I think that both the set it and forget it, because the charitable contribution deduction has happened the moment the money hits the donor advised fund. And then there's there is, you're right, the inertia and the confusion, I think sometimes, about what's the best way to use the money. Not sure what a DAF is. Thank you. Okay, so let's step back for a moment. This is an opportunity for the financial planner and me to do a quick tutorial. First of all, a donor advised fund, just think of it as a box you put money in. Okay, I always say this about every technical guy. It's a box you put money in. And when you move money into that box, you get a charitable deduction. And so think of it as delinking the decision-making of where the money goes to what charity from the charitable deduction. Well, why would you want to do that? Well, let's imagine you have a situation where you have a particularly large tax year for whatever reason. I'll give that one example. Someone sells a business. They've built a business and they sell a business. And this in 2023, I'll just use this as a hypothetical, is going to be the largest amount of tax they're ever going to pay in their life, because they're going to have this huge capital gain from selling the business. And they want to offset some of that capital gain by doing a larger than they normally would, sometimes a significantly larger contribution to some sort of charitable entity in order to get the tax deduction now. And they have to do it in 2023, but they're not prepared to make decisions about where, I'll make up a number, $200,000 is going to go, or $500,000 is going to go, or even $50,000 is going to go. They just are not sure what charity it needs to go to. So we can open for them a donor advised fund. They can conduit money into that donor advised fund, get the tax deduction, and then take their time to make determination as to what charities will get that money out of the donor advised fund. Meanwhile, the money in the donor advised fund can be invested and can be making money. Yes, you're right. We're going to get to that around standardized deductions and charitable deductions, right? So, but let's imagine we're in a moment where for your Sandy's raising the question about a charitable deduction only helps if you're itemizing. So if you're just in a place where you're taking a standard deduction, then it's not a tax advantage. That's correct. So itemizing, if for a married couple, just think, if we don't have itemized deductions beyond about $26,000 or $27,000 this year, then the standard deduction is going to be more than our itemized deduction. So to get to an itemized deduction, you have to give away significantly more. You've got to push up the meter of the itemized deduction. But so yes, that's the case for a charitable deduction. But another way to look at it, in addition to that, is the large lifetime event I'm describing, for example, or conversely, let's imagine you have a stock in your after-tax portfolio that has a very low basis. Grandma gave you Coke shares. And Coke was like the family dog. You never wanted to sell it, even though you thought about it from time to time. Or you own Exxon because you inherited it from somebody. You don't want to own Exxon, but it's got such a low basis that if you sell it, you're going to lose a fair amount of money to taxes. Going to have a big capital gain. Well, one option is to take the Exxon stock, we'll use that as the example, and move shares of it into the donor advised fund. You get a tax deduction based on the value at the time you move that money of the Exxon shares. And you will not have had to sell it. It'll just go into the donor advised fund, in which it could be sold and diversified, and then you can give it away over time. So another use of the donor advised fund is to move highly appreciated stock and give highly appreciated stock. The other way we see, seeing as how I'm going down the tax route, I'll go here for a minute, you guys, and then we'll come back around to this. We've got a number of clients who are now over 70 and a half and or 73 in some cases now because of the tax law change. And they're having to take what are called required minimum distributions from their IRAs or other qualified accounts, IRA, 401k, 403b. If you give money directly from the IRA to a charity, which is called a qualified charitable deduction, it serves to satisfy some of that required minimum distribution, or all of it, depending on how much you give away, and you are not taxed on the required minimum distribution. So we now have a number of clients who are in that situation, and we're saying, A, if you don't itemize, or B, even if you do a little bit, you are still better off from a tax perspective, using this qualified charitable distribution technique directly to charity. So the bottom line is, there are lots of very effective ways to give to charity that benefit you tax-wise. But there still is the question, and this coming back to Faye and Kelly's work, of, okay, yeah, we get it in a donor advised fund, but where does it live after that? Where does it go? And when does it have impact? Because the point of the exercise, and certainly all these small donors, these 320 billion, if only 20% is coming out of a donor advised fund, we got a lot of human beings giving a lot of money to charity. How effective is that? And, and how can we be more impactful and thoughtful about how we do that, and continue to support that sector, and so the needs of so many people and the strategic needs of social change. That's my jam. How do we do that? Okay, so
well said, and thank you for that last part, especially because the first part is, your world of expertise, and the second part, what I want people to hear, is what Kelly and I really want to help change that graph, so that there's not all that money just sitting there when there's so much need in the world, and there are obviously people who want to help.
Yeah,
we want to bridge that gap.
So was this the end of your PowerPoint? Because I don't know if I clicked through all the way. Should we go back to not sure?
There's one more.
Yes. How can I make sure my charitable investments have the greatest impact? Go ahead, tell us.
Okay, Kelly and I are both going to tell you. The first thing is, it's kind of obvious. It's obvious to some degree. You have a clear strategy and goals with your financial advising portfolio, and that's the same thing that you need to do here. A lot of times what you see is people, when you ask them, what are you trying to accomplish? They'll say, I want to end poverty, or I want to stop global warming. And I can unequivocally say that that's not enough specificity to target both the giving and the outcomes. So one thing is a clear strategy and some specificity. And the other thing that's really important, I've learned over time, is it's really difficult to get meaningful results by individuals acting completely on their own. So giving circles are one way to do it, but there's also ways to collaborate with the nonprofits themselves, with government entities like Atlanta Housing, places like that, or even, influencers like politicians. So I guess the bottom line is don't do it in a vacuum, do it in a collaboration. And that's something that we talk more to people about once they design a plan. And then Kelly, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Yeah, so dedicate sufficient resources sounds kind of self-evident, but I think moving social issues is a little bit like home renovations. It's always going to take more money and more time than you initially think.
A lot more money and a lot
Yeah,
more time.
yeah,
Infinite
and
time. Yeah, right.
and people say charities aren't accomplishing anything or aren't living up to what we want them to do, but if you're underfunding them, they're never going to accomplish it. So be realistic about your goals and the dollars and the time that you're dedicating to it. And when we say know when to cut bait, that's really about talking ahead of time about if what you want to accomplish with a nonprofit and what goals you both have and how you're going to get there. And we've really talked about risk tolerance for your philanthropic donations. So are you willing to give to something that's a prototype or being tested, or do you want to be really confident of the outcomes? So just being aware of what you consider failure for a grant or what you would think of as your donation not being accomplishing what you want it to, and think through the scenarios of what you would do, whether you move on to the next thing or double down, because those are really options and different people have different reactions. So
okay, I'm going to stop sharing now, I think, because I think we have
yes,
some okay.
That's great.
So a few things come to mind around this. It's like your point about not having a clear sense of what your own personal parameters are, leave you vulnerable to the constant ask. It would be like, again, sort of using your analogy of, you either have an investment strategy so that you're not just reacting to any random fund or investment idea or whatever that just comes down the pike at you. And this would be the same way. I think a lot of people wind up giving money to nonprofits just because somebody asked them, not because it's within the context of what they really want to focus on, or they just feel like there is infinite need. And so the clear advantage, it seems to me, of having and really understanding of what your particular thing is, whatever it is, and allowing that to change over time and grow and educate yourself, etc. But is the ability to say, yeah, that's not really in my parameter. That's someone else's job to do. I feel like this is my particular thing. This is where my heart lies. This is the job I want to do. So I can see that is one of the number one. I mean, and I wanted to say one quick thing about collaboration. I belong to a donor network and have belonged to a donor network for 12 years. It's the Women Donors Network. And my philanthropic or donor life or donor activist life has changed dramatically over that time. I remember going to the first meeting of this donor network that I sort of got pulled into, and I didn't really know what I was getting into. And somebody said, well, what do you fund? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I was just like, I was so new on the journey. And I say that to say, no matter how much you're giving, you can be just really new on the journey, and it's okay, but like recognize it's a journey and get help and support for continuing on that journey, which is what you guys are doing. Is being you have a business. Say more about your business, because I'm giving you an opportunity here to, in a sense, advertise your services, and I want you to be able to talk about what your services are. and how, you know, what they cost. And also like how people can pay for them, because those of you sitting with donor advised funds will be happy to hear that that is one way to consider paying for your services. So talk a little bit more, if you don't mind.
You want me to start, Faye, and you can
Sure.
jump
Yep.
in?
Go right ahead.
If someone doesn't have a strategy, that's the first thing we try to work with people on. And we call it a clarity plan, because it really is about getting clear on what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And that's based on your life experiences, your motivations, your values, what you're interested in. So we go through a process to really understand what the donor cares most about, why they care about it, and what issues they want to work to address. And so we work through that and really try to understand all of those things and create a focus statement. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to do it. And I want to benefit these people. Very clear cut. So that, to Maggie's point, you can say very clearly, this is what I want to do, and this is what I'm going to say no to. And people are very understanding when you say no because I give somewhere else. I don't think anyone can really argue with that, because you're telling them where your heart lies and how you're helping the community. And then the next step is to make sure people know how to actually go out and find the nonprofits that are doing the kind of work they want to do, and assessing the results that they're able to achieve. So that's kind of a package of services we provide as a first step if someone's just starting to think about their journey and think about becoming more focused in their giving. And we try to keep that at a reasonable rate so that people can start. So we charge $3,000 for that. We also just help people wherever they are. So if they're interested in a specific issue, we can help them research that and find nonprofits. If they want to evaluate what their prior giving has done, we can do that. We can help take people on site visits so they can kick the tires and learn a little bit more. So we really can go across the gamut, but the starting point is, as both Faye and Maggie said, getting clear on where you want to focus so that you can have some impact, if that's what your goal is.
And notably,
Faye,
if
what did
you
I do?
have a donor advised fund, you can pay that $3,000 fee from the donor advised fund, because it's a legitimate donor counseling or donor what would you call donor consulting kind of cost.
Right. It's just like paying investment fees for the money sitting there. It's a professional advice related to the funds that are in your account.
Charitable advice. Yep.
I want to just add one thing, that just clarify one thing actually. That was a great description, Kelly. We've been doing this since March, and so it's kind of cool to hear it from someone, to me, and just listening to it. But one of the things that Kelly was talking about that is part of the $3,000 package is vetting and selecting a nonprofit. But what I want you all to know is that we find one nonprofit that fits within your clarity plan, and then equip you with the skills to identify others if that's what you want to do. And within that is, if you're interested in tracking donations, if you're interested in evaluating impact, it goes a little bit deeper, but it's kind of a training, if you will, on how to do that writ large. If you're one of those people like I am, I'm a delegator, I'd be like, I don't want to do that. Then we do hourly work at $300 an hour, where we offer an additional menu of services. So if you want to delegate that, if you want a list of 10 nonprofits or something, we can do that. It doesn't fit in the package, but we know that people have different desires about how deeply they want to be involved, and we want to accommodate that.
One of the things, when I first started talking to clients about donor advised funds several years ago now, I don't know, 15 years ago now or something. One of the things I would talk about isn't just the tax deduction, which is handy, but was the idea that, well, one of the things that was cool about a donor advised fund is that it allowed you to thematize clearly this pot of money and make, have the space and time to make decisions coming from the donor advised fund and involve the next generation. Inculcate giving as part of your family line. I still think that's what I also used to say, if you don't want a birthday present, you can always tell people to make contribution to your donor advised fund, and then you get to give it away. By the way, that still is advice that holds. If you don't want a birthday present, you can tell people to write a check to your donor advised fund, and then you can give it away. But so there's the legacy piece, but the other thing, and I sort of want to get your reaction to this. I have some clients, one person is coming to mind in particular, who's fairly high net worth and really wants to move the meter on who decides who gets the money. So she set up a donor advised fund, and she has named other grantors who are from BIPOC communities, that's Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, mostly women, to be the grantors, because she doesn't think it's enough to give money away. She wants to also give the power of decision-making about where that money should go charitably to another set of people who are otherwise, historically at least, left out of that power, left out of that decision-making. I think that's pretty interesting concept.
I think that that's a really good strategy for getting the money where it needs to go most. And, good for her, because I think that takes a certain willingness to trust. You and I have talked a lot about trust-based philanthropy, and I think that's a great example of that. I want to meet people where they are. And I'm not going to say I don't have biases about where I want to, direct people, but I try to meet them where they are. We do, and help them discover how they want to do this. That might be one way. Another way that I think is really useful to think about is how you get your children and their children and how you begin to kind of inculcate giving as a family practice.
Right.
And so we are interested too in working with families, working with people who want to involve their children and aren't exactly sure how to do that. And we can be a vehicle for that. So, for me, Maggie, there are a lot of reasons why people give and how they give. And most of them to me are, I want to help those folks, and so if somebody wants to do it the way you just described, I would love to help someone like that find those places. And I think at Resonance would love to work on that. But we also want to help people who are like, I have no idea what I'm doing and I don't know where to start. These are the things I value.
People
I want to meet people. I think we want to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
And one thing we haven't really touched on, and I think it's even more of a gift, the person you're talking about, Maggie, is that there really is a joy of giving. The social scientists have done all kinds of research that it makes you happier to give than to spend money on yourself or something.
Yes.
And we feel like if you really know where your money's going and are confident that it's accomplishing what you want it to, that joy is enhanced. But I think it's wonderful to empower someone else to give and to have that experience as well.
Right.
I know there's one just on the family pack too. There's a app for people who want to create donor advised funds that lets their children suggest charities
I've seen that
to
app,
the parents.
Yes.
So that's a way to start when people are young, to get them just thinking charitably, because it really is what you grow up thinking about, how you perceive the world, and how you want to leave the world afterwards. And so it's important we talk about it too.
Right. Well, we've talked about this offline, you guys, you and I, but just wanting to also acknowledge that there are cultures where the giving is to family, the giving is to relatives, the giving is direct giving to community that isn't the 501c3 universe that we're talking about. And that is a form of giving. It's just, it doesn't get captured in the statistics, but it's mutual support, it's mutual benefit. And there was a study commission through WDN actually for an organization that wound up developing an organization called Donors of Color, which was one of the first donor networks for people of color. And what they found was a very high percentage of those folks giving was really going back into family relationships, that was necessary for historical reasons, or also going to colleges and universities, some of them historically Black colleges and universities in this case. And so just acknowledging that there's like this whole part of our economy, culture where that happens, and that's it's still charity, it's still giving, it's still trying to move the meter, etc. But it's in a little different area than what we're talking.
Charity starts at home, right?
It does. It begins right. So that was my father's attitude.
Well, and I think we want to acknowledge all of that, and I think the three of us were talking just about the difference between philanthropists and donors, and philanthropists sound so highfalutin.
Right.
But we're all just really donors. No one calls Bill Gates a donor, but he's just writing checks like we do. Right. And we're all just trying to contribute in the best way we can, I think, and shouldn't be put off by the enormity or the lack of resources, I think.
Yeah, and I'll just say, in my own journey, my own identity, I've come to think of myself as a donor organizer. And I function that way very much in this organization I'm involved in, WDN. But in an interesting way, I sort of function that way even at Chicory, in the sense that we're trying to, I'm not organizing for a particular cause through Chicory, but just organizing through the idea that, doing this work in the world is just more broadly, like I said at the outset, it brings joy. It's part of a healthy relationship with your money. It's part of that whole journey, that the ways in which money reflects a level of heart care and spirituality, even, etc. The ways these sort of seemingly disparate worlds come together, so I'll just say that in my own life, as my own ability to give has increased, and my own willingness to give has increased, and my own kind of clarity about what it was I was put here to do around that, it's been a very joyous thing. And I would just want to encourage all of you on the call, at whatever level of giving you find yourself, to think about that, have conversation. If you are interested in connecting to Faye or Kelly, we're more than happy to connect you. But even if you just want to have a conversation about, with your financial advisor, for example, about, well, how much can I give away in a way that still continues to keep me in a situation of sustainability personally, but allows me to perhaps participate in this even in a bigger way than you might think possible. We do the math for clients all the time. We have some clients who don't have annoying dogs, but we have many who do have annoying dogs who bark in the background. But but anyhow, just know that we can run those numbers for you, and we're happy to do it. So.
And Maggie, I want to add something before we end. We also work on helping you figure out how to give your time and your expertise and your skill set, and not just and maybe your connections. It's not just about money. Giving takes a lot of different forms, and that's part of a holistic clarity plan. Really is thinking about, how do I want to give back that's not just financial. So want to make sure people understand that that's part of the process too.
Right. Time, talent, and treasure, as
that's right.
we used to say. Yeah, exactly.
And there's a new T, and it's ties. I just saw that. Time, talent, treasure, and ties, which is sort of like your connections, your influence.
Connections, yeah, right, you're right. Amplify your influence. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, folks, this has been a great conversation. Thank you to all of you who joined. We certainly appreciate your participation. Thank you for those of you who decided to tune in later and are listening to this. Don't hesitate to reach out to us about any questions at Chicory regarding this topic, and also to connect you to Faye and Kelly, we're absolutely happy to do that. For those of you in the Atlanta area, do come out, and you're invited too, by the way, Kelly. Faye's a
Thank you.
client, so she's gonna show up anyhow, but you are absolutely invited. Come on out. October 7th at Sweetwater Brewery, and we would love to see you there. It's gonna be fun. We're gonna support 2 charities, the names of which have escaped my mind, but one of them that has to do with fish and the other has to do with pets, and you're gonna love them. And on that note, we'll cut the recording, Liz, and we'll say goodbye.
Great. I'll just also say if anyone wants to learn more about what Faye and I are doing, our website is resonancetl.com.
Thank you.
So,
And it is live, so go
Yeah,
and, let us know if you have any questions.
yeah, you can email us from there as well.
Great.
Yeah, thank you very much for
Yeah, this has
this
been a
conversation.
fabulous
Appreciate
conversation.
it, Maggie.
Thank you.